the Unleash Success podcast, where we break down the secrets of success to give you real tools and strategies that get real results. And now, here's your host, Cofounding.
Welcome back to Unleash Success. If you haven't subscribed to our newsletter yet, just go to unleashsuccess.com, enter your email so you can get all the tools and strategies sent directly to you each and every week. Welcome back to Unleash Success. This is Cofounding, your host. We are breaking down the secrets of success today with Mr. Brandon Bruce. He is the co-founder of Cirrus Insight, which was the number 41 on the Inc. 500 in 2016, generates over $12 million in annual revenue with over 150,000 customers. You'd think this guy would only do business, but on his spare time, he also runs 500 plus miles endurance races. Brandon, welcome to Unleash Success.
Awesome to be here. Thanks for having me.
Dude, so I got to start with this endurance racing really quick because 500 plus miles, where did that come from?
Yeah, it kind of random, right? Like many things in life, I happen to be online and I don't even know how I came across it. I think maybe a friend of mine mentioned like, hey, have you heard of this crazy bicycle race across Death Valley? It's called the Furnace Creek 508. I was like, wow, that's pretty random. Let's just go hop on the web and check it out. And so when I started reading about it, it was just one of those things that clicks. Like, I don't know why, but it just made sense to me. Like, oh, totally. Like, I definitely have to do that. The irony, of course, was I didn't even own a bike. So I was like, well, first things first. Like, I definitely need to do this race. It's going to take me some training to get there. But yeah, it wasn't more than a couple weeks after that. I went and ordered my first bike. I couldn't get one off the rack because I'm 6'8", so they had to custom make it because my dimensions are a little bit different than the average bicycle consumer. But once it arrived, I went out with my buddies. The first ride we did, I lived in Santa Barbara, California at the time. So the first ride we did was a 50 miler out to the beach and back. And I almost collapsed at the end. And there began the training. And about a year after that, we went out in the desert and knocked out 508 miles in 35 hours and 7 minutes.
Holy cow.
Just a single stage race, right? You start, you finish. If you want to take a rest, if you want to stop for food, you can, but the time keeps ticking by.
So you looked at this, it said, 500 mile plus race in Death Valley of all places.
Yeah, it's like, this would be awesome. I've never been out there. I got to go check this place out.
Yeah.
It's got kind of a famous name to spook everybody. And it does get hot there and it's extremely dry. So you do want to be careful. I did a training camp out there and I did a number of rides, and there were a few occasions where people had to get helped out. You don't want to run out of water. You don't want to run out of salt. You take care of those couple things, and it's a beautiful area. There's hardly any cars because not that many people go to visit Death Valley.
Yeah, right.
So yeah, it's a great recreational area for anyone that likes to get out and run, bicycle, hike. Really, really cool place to visit. That's not necessarily on the top of people's national parks list, but really should be.
So it's just something you just saw and you said, I have to do this.
Yeah. Just, it's one of those things. It just makes sense. A lot of people, when I told them I was getting into cycling, they're, to go where? Like to commute? Cycling then and now has become a thing where it's where I go to think. So once I'm on the bike, it's Einstein talked about this, right? It's just like the rhythm, the simplicity, the magic of keeping yourself upright while you're, cruising forward at 20, 30 miles an hour is actually very relaxing. So it's the place I go to, kind of like people write books about your best ideas come in the shower or come when you're on a long walk. Those are times when you got a lot of oxygen coming in. Swimming is great for that. And you're kind of at peace, so you're not focused on work, and then the best ideas come to you then. So I go on rides, and I'm actually back in training. I live in Knoxville, Tennessee now, and there's a fundraiser for the Pat Summitt Foundation, which is located here. They do Alzheimer's research. Pat Summitt was the winningest coach in women's basketball. And so we're doing a ride in October that will go from Knoxville to Daytona Beach, which is about 1,100 miles in 10 days. So starting to get fit again, which is fun. I haven't done that since we started the company. I had a family and started the company the same year. So I haven't been on the bike too much, but starting to get back into it.
Wow. So I was just going to ask, actually, when did you do this endurance race? Was it before you started the company?
Yeah, this was quite a while ago. I did that in I kind of did my endurance racing in California, like 2002, 3, 4, and then moved to DC and did some kind of what they call randonneuring, long rides, 200, 250, 300 miles. We just kind of go cruise the countryside for a while with some friends. And then got in with some racers and endurance folks here in Knoxville. But this will be the first time that I've really gotten back into it in the last 6-7 years. Because once we started the company, things got pretty busy.
Oh yeah. I love what you said too about just kind of getting in the zone a little bit when you're exercising. I have the similar experience where, if I'm in the gym, I get kind of into a flow state where I start solving problems. It's just like you forget about trying to fix everything. You focus on this one thing and it's like meditation. And then all of a sudden your best ideas start to flow through.
Yeah. In a lot of ways, it's unintuitive in the sense it's like, well, I don't have time to hit the gym today because I have this thorny problem at work. So I better put in more time, right? Time solves all problems. The right kind of time, right? It's actually probably better to go to the gym. So a fellow I used to work with said that his boss would say, oh, you look stuck. You better go for a run. And because she knew that he needed to run in order to figure out his problem. So he'd go run and come back and solve the problem. And I was like, that's great that he could do that. And it was great of her to understand that he was the best employee he could be if she told him to go run, during the middle of the day. She's like, go take a run. You'll come back and you'll solve the problem. For many of us, sports, athletics, recreation is the best way to solve those business problems, I think.
Yeah. And also too, just going through that kind of intense preparation also prepares you a lot for kind of the business world, like we were talking about. What do you think is some of the important lessons you learned in, 500 plus mile endurance races?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it, I think, it is the preparation. I did a lot of miles in advance, a lot of centuries, a lot of double centuries. Someone had kind of said, you can always go twice as far as you've gone. And I was like, well, that doesn't make any sense. But if you sort of buy into it. So I was like, well, all right, that makes sense. So I rode from Santa Barbara down to Long Beach and back. So I got, about 250 miles in, because then I figured, well, now I'm ready to do the 500 miles in the desert. The two rides were very different. Death Valley had a lot more climbing. So there's a lot of just the physical training, which I think impacts your mental fitness for getting out there and feeling confident. But then there's a lot of also just miscellaneous logistics, right? Getting all your gear ready, getting all your fuel, your nutrition, your water, your spare tires. I mean, all that stuff that goes into planning any sort of camping trip, adventure, in my case, a bicycle race. Super important to have all those ducks in a row and have a great team. So, Ryan, my best friend from college, now my business partner, was part of my crew out in the desert, right? Drove a car and followed me the whole route. My brother was there. My girlfriend, now my wife, was out there with me. So it was like people that I really cared about, that cared about me, were out there looking after me so that I didn't, hurt myself out in the middle of the desert. And that was helpful because about, 2/3 of the way through the race, I started radioing my brother and saying, hey, I think we got a problem with the bicycle. The rear stays, really look sketchy, like they're starting to bend. And he was like, no, you're totally good. The bike's made out of steel, right? The rear stays were not bending. I was just starting to have some mild hallucinations, which is not unusual when you're in the desert and you've been pushing yourself for the last 24 hours.
Wow.
So he's like, no, you're totally cool. Well, then I started doing like little loops in the middle of the road and stuff. And he was like, hey, check it out. We need to take a look at your bike. We need to pull over for just a second. And once he got me off the bike, he's like, you need to rest for a minute. You need to settle down. You're not making good progress. You got to go straight. And so I chugged like 5 or 6 Red Bulls and then laid down for a few minutes to take a nap.
Oh my God.
And then sat bolt upright about 17 minutes later and was like, oh, I got to go. So we got to keep riding. This is, you get competitive when you're out there. And it just so happened to coincide with sunrise, which was lucky. When you close your eyes when it's dark and you open them when it's light, your body kind of gets tricked a little bit into thinking you must have slept. So I popped up and knocked out the rest of the ride. But it was helpful not to be out there by myself, starting to do loops in the road. Not a good situation. So it's good to have a good team with you. And just kind of fully commit to it. My favorite photo from the race was one in which I'm bicycling by a road sign that simply says, it's a classic sign. It says no stopping anytime, right? Like you can't stop here on the side of the road. But I and the crew were kind of interpreted that as like, no stopping any time. You got to finish the whole race.
Right.
Keep going until you're done. And in fact, Pat Summitt here had one of her many famous quotes was, you're not finished when you're tired. You're finished when you're done. Because anyone can get tired at any time, but only you can choose when you're done. So make sure you're done, and then you can, make sure you're finished. Then you say, okay, I'm done.
Right.
And I love that.
And how do you get the mental mindset though to just keep going? I mean, so many people get tired and they're like, oh, I'm not done yet, but I'll just finish it tomorrow. Like they manipulate time to say, I'll do it later. How do you keep going?
Yeah, I think some of it's just personality based. I've always kind of known, I'm probably inherited some of this. I'm a pretty stubborn guy. And a lot of it is just that, right? It's like, well, you keep doing the same thing. And I've kind of known for some time, and I've come to understand or appreciate a little bit more, later in life, is that I'm actually really good at doing repetitive tasks. And that sounds kind of self-deprecating, like, oh, that's nice, but you really need to be doing strategic thinking and big ideas and stuff. But there's a lot to be said of, making a checklist and being able to, check off each box on the list and not be done until you're done with the list. And so rowing in college is like that, right? It's the same motion over and over with your buddies, trying to move the boat as fast as you can. Usually you do it till you throw up. It's pretty simple. Cycling is the same way. You pedal, 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 pedal. It's the same motion over and over, very rhythmic. And so I like those kind of activities. For some reason, they just kind of make sense to me. And so that's part of it. And part of it is just having the big goal and wanting to know what it feels like at the end. So it's the curiosity, which I think when people have asked me what are traits that I admire, that I look for in other people, whether they're partners or employees or others, is curiosity is number one. So, curiosity is the antidote for lots of things, namely, burnout, lack of empathy, things like that. If you're curious, then you want to know, what does the customer really need here? I'm going to find out. How can I help my colleague do better? I'm curious, like what's their position on this? So if you stay curious, like our kids are, right, then lots of good things happen. You lose your curiosity, you lose your childishness, so to speak, then things get too serious too fast. We lose our sense of humor, I think.
Yeah, that's super interesting too. And I especially, even just doing these interviews, I always like to remain curious. It makes the interview more fun, and it gets the flow of everything going really well. So it's interesting you said that, which makes me ask another question. I'm curious. So where did the idea for Cirrus Insight begin? And you said your business partner is also one of your best friends, right?
Yeah. Ryan Huff, who's in Irvine, California. So we have two main locations, Knoxville and Irvine. So Ryan and I went to college together. So we've been buddies for about 20 years. And I think it's that the nature of our friendship, we've been such close friends for such a long time. I think that's been super important to the extent that we've had success in the company. It's because we have each other's backs and we support each other. So in the kind of the roller coaster that is a startup, oftentimes we sort of trade places, like any good relationship in a lot of ways. If one of us gets, super excited about something, the other one stays a little bit more sober. Like, well, let's really think about this. And when one of us gets really low, the sky is falling, let's strategize, let's come up with a plan, let's work the plan. We did this before, it worked out, let's do it again. So we kind of buoy each other up. But yeah, Ryan saw a gap in the market, like any great innovator or entrepreneur. He said, well, SalesForce is growing super fast and it's a great platform. And a lot of people are moving to the cloud off of legacy customer relationship management platforms. And meanwhile, Gmail seems to be growing into the business sector. At that time, like 500 million people had personal Gmail accounts that started to get popular among businesses. So he was like, there's no app that connects Gmail with Salesforce. And people work all the time in their inbox. That's where all your customers email you. So he's like, what if we just put a side panel inside Gmail that showed you all your customer information from Salesforce and allowed you to essentially do CRM, right? Update records and leads and create new records, et cetera, without ever leaving your inbox or your calendar. I was like, well, it seems to make a lot of sense to me. I like the idea. I worked in sales at the time. So I was like, that would save me a lot of time. Let me start working the phone. Let me call some people, call some potential partners, see if we can get some pilot users. So he was coding the app. I was getting some pilot users signed up. We got some great feedback from this initial cohort of about 1,000 people. And they basically defined our roadmap for the next probably 18 months. Right? Here are all the features you guys need to build. But the predominant feedback was, this is saving us time. This is adding value. And it's helping our team, if they were a manager, it's helping our team actually use Salesforce, which is the big challenge, right? We have this great platform and no salesperson wants to log into it. So they're like, this is solving a big pain point for us. So we would sign up, we would pay for it if you guys launch this as a real product. And that recommendation from those pilot users kind of got us over the hump and led to probably our best decision, which was simply just to launch. So rather than fine tuning the product over the next 6, 12, 18 months and getting it just right so that we were super happy with all the bells and whistles, we just launched it. And enough people found enough value. We started signing up some customers, and that provided that initial cash flow and started kind of the flywheel effect of the software as a service business. So that was back at the end of 2011. Since then, we sort of expanded on that philosophy of meeting users where they are. So we meet them in Gmail. Now we have an Outlook and Office 365 app, Android and iPhone apps for mobile devices. So wherever you are in your inbox, you want to update Salesforce, you want to get information from the database, you can.
I love what you said there about launching and instead of fine tuning everything, we just launched and kind of let our customers help guide us. Knowing it wasn't perfect, you still started it right then and there, and it took off.
Well, the first time I remember, we walked into a customer's office in Palo Alto to go visit them, and they were one of our early customers. And as we walked in, we saw people's screens, and of course, they were working in their inbox in Gmail, and we saw our app in there, and totally freaked me out, right? It wasn't like, oh, that's so awesome, like they're using our app. I was like, oh my gosh, these are like real quota-carrying salespeople, meat eaters out there hustling, trying to make sales, and they're relying on our app, right, to do their work and save them time, make them efficient. And so that was humbling. It was really neat to see. And it was also kind of freaky because we knew like, oh, we still need to add all this cool stuff, right? Like it's not even finished yet. But thankfully they were getting value from it in the first instance. So that was an interesting experience. Yeah,
that's awesome because a lot of people have a great idea and then they spend all this time, money, energy, never even sharing it with the world. And, they just never take the action. They never launch it. And I just think about that it's inspiring to hear that you guys were able to launch something and then improve upon it and create something so incredible because so many people need to go.
Yeah. For many of us, I think we're in businesses where, it's not a major scientific innovation. It's not a biotech product. It's not going to be subject to patent protection. This is more, the code itself is copyright. It's, it's trade secret. It's ours. We don't share it out. But mostly it's about getting into market and executing, in which case, you're mostly in a race to get to know your customers better than anybody else and hopefully serve them better than anybody else can. And that has, to your point, has a lot less to do with keeping a secret. I don't want anyone to know what I'm cooking up in the lab, and a lot more to do with telling everybody that's willing to listen. And that's, I think, applicable probably to the majority of businesses. Like I love businesses that have IP protection. Like how cool is that? You tell someone to stop doing what you're doing, right? And you have this little monopoly for a certain number of years. But I think for most of us, we're better served by just telling everybody, hey, I'm doing this, or I'm trying to do this. I'm trying to execute. And more often than not, people will be helpful or they'll be willing to try it and provide some feedback. And certainly also some will come in and compete with you, but some we're going to anyway. Right. So not really worth keeping it to yourself.
Yeah, I hear that, man. A lot of times I always say this, I had the idea when I was a kid. It was like the remote controller for the TV. I played video games as a kid and I was like, why don't they have a wireless remote controller for our video games? That would be awesome, right? And of course, I always thought it. I always wanted to do it. But I was a kid and for whatever reason, I thought I couldn't back then. And of course, 5 years later, they came out with wireless remote controls. I mean, somebody was going to do it anyways.
Yeah, it's just many of these things, I think, are, they're a matter of time, or lots of people, honestly, this seems to happen all the time. They have the same idea at around the same time. I mean, the famous examples back in history, like calculus, right? Where two people essentially invented at the same time. Yeah. And that nowadays, that seems to happen even more. Like someone has an idea for something online and boom, 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 3 websites pop up the next day, all doing the same thing. So then it really emphasizes the need for execution, because it's like, well, hard to keep anybody out these days. It's all online. It's all pretty public.
Exactly.
whether we want it to be or not. So you kind of have to get out and hustle it out.
Even if you pop up a shop for whatever you're selling, it's like somebody sees it posted online. Now 100,000 people see it. And of course it's going to spread quickly.
That's true. It's not like when you used to be able, maybe have a retail storefront and it could sort of grow and get its legs in some random geography and no one else in the rest of the United States knew about it, right? So it was like you got strong there and then you could branch out. Now, someone's going to Instagram that right away.
Right.
Everyone's going to know about it tomorrow. So yeah, it's a different game.
So quick question for you guys, for you and your partner. I was wondering just what was your business experience before starting this company? I know you said he codes. How did you guys get into this before? What were you doing before this?
So Ryan had developed a lot of expertise on the SalesForce platform. And after working for a few companies, IBM and others, he started a consulting company to build software for software companies, meaning a company may have built some great software, but now they want to port it to the Salesforce platform or appeal to Salesforce customers. So he would build the software for them. So having developed that expertise, I think he was enjoying building these, bespoke solutions for other companies, but also really had this kind of inner desire to have his own product, have something that he could take from, zero to hero, hopefully. Meanwhile, I was doing essentially what I describe as frontline sales, which is fundraising. So I was working for Marable College here near Knoxville in Tennessee, raising money for scholarships and the endowment and building projects. So I was going, out to alumni houses and applying for grants from foundations and stuff, and just basically doing sales, which in the nonprofit world usually isn't called sales. It's called like development or advancement, but it's sales.
Right.
And so when Ryan started talking about, hey, what do you think of this idea? I was like, these are addressing some of the pain points that I have every day, right? The data that's not accessible to me where I work, not available right in time. Folks asking me to update records. And I'm like, well, I could spend the whole day updating records, or I could get out in the field and actually go ask for money. Which one do you want? Of course, go ask for money. So the updates didn't get made. So it's like, there's got to be a better way to sync the data into the platform. So when he started to describe what he had in mind, I was like, I'll be the first customer. Let me go see if I can find some more. And that was the beginning of it. But before that, we had both gone to business school. I went to law school because a lot of members of my family have been to law school. So it's sort of like, speaking the family language, and also just out of curiosity. And plus I thought it'd be a helpful background for, hopefully starting a company or a nonprofit or social enterprise. Most of my work history is with nonprofits. So I just thought the law would be a good background to have. And I think it has been useful.
That's very interesting. My sister's actually a lawyer in Las Vegas.
Cool.
She just graduated like a couple of years ago. So did you ever practice law?
No. You used it to do some estate planning and some gifting and fundraising, right? So to sort of help people navigate their choices between different trust vehicles and other giving vehicles. And now that we've started the company, it's certainly been useful just to, execute contracts and agreements with partners, customers, vendors, set up HR systems, hopefully make good decisions that position the company well. And now I will say, the regulatory framework's only gotten more complex, right? Now there's GDPR for our company. And so, it gets kind of in the weeds. And so the legal background's kind of helpful because for a very simple reason, there's a lot of reading. And going to law school, you get used to just sitting and reading a lot. And then that's an acquired skill, I think.
It's interesting how sometimes we do things earlier in life that at the time we say we're never going to use this again, like going to law school, and yet it serves you so much in your business now.
Yeah, I think the hope maybe in the back of our minds is that most of those experiences or classroom classes, lectures, et cetera, are accretive somehow. I think many of us in some ways feel like, well, I don't know that major I did. I'm not sure if I'm really using that now, but somewhere in there, we learned a lot of stuff. What exactly that was, hard to remember. But at the very least, we did some growing up. I mean, for me, thinking about college, a lot of what I did there was growing up. And I think getting in with the crew team was super important to me because it gave me my initial cohort of friends at UC Santa Barbara. It got me on a really regular routine, right? Getting up super early, about 4 a.m, getting a good night's sleep the night before, rinse and repeat. So the days went by pretty fast. and also just got me in the habit. So that's when I get my work done, right? In the morning, I get up really early, get my workout in. I get some initial work done when everything's still quiet before the day kind of starts. And for me, that's just kind of a routine or a habit that has stuck with me. So I kind of credit those college years with giving me that discipline.
Totally. I have a similar routine, wake up, go work out, get ready for the day, like kind of sets my mind.
It's like the Stephen Covey, like the daily private victory, right? Like
right.
You go out and get it. You've already won. And then the rest of the day somehow takes care of itself.
That's awesome. I love that book, actually. That's really cool. So I was wondering too, just about your journey of entrepreneurship and some of the traits that you've seen that have really helped you along the way, things that are good quality traits that we should embrace as entrepreneurs.
I think one of the things that I feel like I've gotten better at over time, and I think all these things you continue to get better at, but I've noticed that I make decisions faster now. And I think a lot of the entrepreneurs that I've seen and admire, they're just able to like see something, analyze it very quickly, take in a lot of information, listen to others on the team. It's not like they're just, saying from on high, this is how it's going to be, like it's predetermined. They're doing their research, but then they can make a decision and then move forward with it. And I was at a conference where a bunch of entrepreneurs and a bunch of investors and others were there, and they were saying, what qualities do you appreciate in an entrepreneur? And I think the expected outcome was, the ability to take a risk and perseverance and intelligence and all that good stuff, which are all great traits. But the one that won the day was the ability to make a decision. And in fact, the investor sort of weighed in and said, yeah, it doesn't have to be the right decision every time. It's got to be right more often than not. Otherwise, you got a problem. But they said they have more problems when companies just get stuck, right? Or when a leader just, I'm not sure. I don't know what I want to do. And then it kind of grinds the whole team's like, well, we'll just wait then. No one else can make that decision.
Right.
So I feel like, I've had the opportunity to make more and more decisions, make a lot of mistakes on the way, learn from those hopefully and reincorporate it into the decision tree. But now I feel like I make decisions faster. I can see stuff and just be, okay, we're going to go and kind of evaluate, what's the probability of getting it right and wrong, and what's the severity if I get it right or wrong, right? So it's kind of a classic law school formula we used to use for negligence, right? What's the probability of harm and what's the severity if it does happen? And therefore, what's the liability? And it's the same sort of thing, just making a decision in a company.
I completely agree. And I actually think that that's like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. And so the more action you take, the easier it gets to make a decision, to move forward, to just do something. But I've been there, I'm sure you have too, and I know what everybody else is thinking, but what if I'm wrong? What if I mess up? What if I screw up?
Yeah, no, and I have a lot of trouble with that. I have a feeling a lot of other people do too. I mean, entrepreneurship, I think, tends to attract a lot of folks with somewhat controlling personalities. Not necessarily bad, like they want to control everybody. They just want to have control over things. And so a lot of us, I think, have felt like in other work environments, like, well, we're just too far separated from the product or from the customer, like from what's actually happening. And we want to be closer to the action. And so it's like, well, I'll start my own then. That way I can do a little bit of everything, kind of, the jack of all trade aspect to it. And, but we get ourselves then into a position where almost undoubtedly we're going to make some mistakes and do some things that lose us some control. And so it's being able to deal with that. I've always told people, my family, part of my mom's side of the family is from Omaha. So a lot of us really follow and admire Warren Buffett, the Oracle of Omaha. So he's being interviewed once, one of his interviews, and they said, well, what trait is the most important in an investor? You're the most successful investor, of all time. And again, I think they expected him to say, the ability to analyze the numbers, or raw intelligence, or willingness to take a risk, et cetera. And instead he responded, emotional stability. And they were like, what? But it makes sense, right? He's investing in a market, and the market goes up and down. And if you ride that with your emotions all day, and entrepreneurs tend to be, on the spectrum of human beings, I think more emotional than most. Like they really feel it. They want to succeed. They want to push the ball forward. So his advice toward emotional stability is kind of a nice, it's a high bar, not easy to do every day, but I think it's a good it's a good trait to aspire to.
100%. It's a big thing that I talk about is, and I call it emotional fitness, but just the ability to control our emotions instead of letting them control us. And in the business world, there are a lot of ups and a lot of downs. And so if you can't control your own emotions, you're going to be a mess through that entire experience instead of really enjoying the process, being able to step back. So 100% agree. And speaking of lows a little bit, what are some, and I know you've had some pivots in your guys' company, what are some mistakes or lows that you guys have had, and how do you overcome them?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, the biggest highs and lowest lows have always had to do with people. And that's something that I've noticed having now started a company, is that I'm just a lot closer to everybody than I ever have been in any other job. And it's not that I couldn't have gotten closer to folks at other jobs, but it was more like, well, I just work here. That sort of syndrome, right? Or show up, do my thing. You're doing your thing. That's cool. Maybe I'll see you after work. Maybe not. We'll see you tomorrow.
Now you have a sense of ownership, right?
Yeah. Now though, I'm in a position where, one of the best things about entrepreneurship, I think, is getting to choose who you work with. Like, it's awesome. We have this great team of folks. So some of the highest highs are, you get these great people. They do amazing things. You just get to sit back and watch, right? You go to a trade show and somebody's just lighting up the booth and you're like, well, I'm watching them saying, I couldn't do that. Not that way. I've got my own style, but they're doing it way better than I could. Or in our case, doing an online demo, or taking care of a customer and support, and they're doing it and just they own it, and that's awesome to watch. Similarly, I think the lows are, you're really there with people in their lives. So when hard things happen in life, someone gets injured or sick, someone passes away, and part of someone's family or a relationship ends for them or something, and I feel like at previous jobs, I always felt like that's really too bad. Like, I'm here for you. But now, it's tighter. People sometimes say, well, work is like family. Kind of. Like, I get the family's family. It's its own thing. Work's different. But we do get close to each other because we spend our waking hours working next to each other. So when stuff happens to people, it's a big deal for the whole company, and everyone kind of, thankfully rallies for them. And that's the great part to see. But it can also be hard for everybody to know, like, so-and-so's really having a hard time, right? It's like the nationwide tagline, like, life comes at you fast. Like, everything's going just fine. Then boom, something happens. And everyone's got to, like, okay, time out. Like, we didn't know that disease was going to happen or that accident was going to happen. And learning to live with that, try to buoy people up, let other people buoy you up, because you're all in the game together, I think has been one of the most interesting things that I've encountered over the last 7 years of running a company. And,
you've got over 65 employees, right? Some of them around there. Yeah. How did you guys decide when was the right time to even start to bring on other people and hire employees?
I mean, when it was just Ryan and me when we started, and then it really came a point where it's like, well, we physically don't have time to do all this stuff. Like, stuff starts falling through the cracks, and you go, that's not how we were doing it before, but I can't do it like I did it before. So I was like, I knew on a first name basis, right, all of our customers up to a certain number. And then after that, it's like, who's that? Did they sign up? Like, I don't think I met them yet. So we brought on some folks on support, marketing, and sales. And Ryan was able to start hiring some engineers because he needed help in the code, because we kept wanting to add more and more features because customers wanted more features. So it just sort of scales like that. And so through cash flow and through angel investors, which were really instrumental for us early on, we were able to kind of smooth out our month-to-month cash and bring on some of our initial employees. And then since then, we've really kind of grown with or trailing growth, which is the opposite model of a lot of high-tech or software companies. So if you're able to raise a lot of money early, you can sort of grow first and then add the customers. For us, since we're basically cash flow driven, we'll add customers and then be like, oh, okay, we need more capacity now. So we'll get the revenue in, and then, okay, we have the capacity to hire another person. Let's try to go get a great one.
I feel like that was a weird flip with technology, was let me go get the people to this and then I'll get the cash later type of thing, where like people would get investors to get cash as opposed to revenue to get the cash in the business. Whereas, back in the day before technology, it was more, okay, once you get the revenue from the customers, now you can start to expand and grow. It's interesting. I think it's a better way to have, customers and cash and revenue before, as opposed to using just investors to grow. Because I was looking at this article the other day, company called Juicero raised over $120 million and then tanked in 2017. And it's like they got all this money from angel investors, but they were getting a little bit of revenue, but it wasn't good enough. It ended up their $700 machine you didn't need. You could squeeze the juice with your hands and get the same effect. So it was like, oh shit, basically, there goes $120 million. So I think it's better to get the revenue first and start to grow more.
It's interesting. I mean, I think it underscores this larger idea that, and I always tell you, like, business is hard. Full stop. Like, if it was easy, everyone would probably do it and every business would succeed wildly. And it turns out there's probably not a good, cookie cutter pattern for like, well, this is how Uber did it. Let's all do it that way. Uber is a pretty unique company. Yeah. This is how Google does it. Well, Google's pretty unique and it's totally different than Apple, really, in most ways, how they do, product or software and how their team is structured versus like a SalesForce, which is, again, totally different technology company, but they have more, feet on the street, right? Tens of thousands of salespeople out there doing their thing, built more on the Oracle model. So, many of them have raised tremendous amounts of upfront capital. Others raised much later, like an Atlassian, right? Basically a bootstrapped company that then later went public for many billions of dollars. Incredible story. And then others of us have largely bootstrapped or were lightly funded from early on. Is there a best, better, good way to do it? Shoot, I don't know. It's almost like whatever works, which is an unfortunate formula because it's kind of ex post facto, right? It's like if it works, then you go, see, like they did it. If it doesn't work, it's like, oh, I knew that wasn't going to work. That seemed risky.
And you guys kind of bootstrapped, and you're in Kentucky, and that's where you guys started this company.
Just south of Kentucky. So we're in Knoxville, Tennessee. So not too far from the border, probably about an hour and a half.
And what is it like to bootstrap an application company like this and to grow it in the very beginning? You don't have a lot of money or you're trying to get investors. How did you guys really grow from zero to, you said that first 1,000 customers you had?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it was staying really focused. So to your point before, it's deciding how you're going to spend your time during the day, all things being equal, assuming we all have 24 hours in a day, how are we going to choose to spend them? And for us, we really got the app into market. So credit to Ryan and his skills to be able to get us from idea to app out there, able to be installed, downloaded, and work without having to do a huge round or hire on a huge team of engineers. We were able to just launch it. And then, really my job then was the go to market. And so I spent all of my time just talking with customers. So there were no distractions about, well, I'm going to talk with customers part of the day, but then I need to go handle, strategy meetings or try to attract, these other partners or parties. None of that. All we did was talk with customers and try to see what they wanted and then see if they would end up, purchasing the app from us. So I did that with Ryan. And then as we started bringing on people, that was everyone's job. So I think one, potential advantage, and there's pros and cons again on both sides, but one advantage of going the bootstrapped model is that it does remove a lot of kind of optional distractions that come, like if you just don't have money to buy something, you just physically can't do it as much as you might want to. And so there's sort of the healthy, kind of the Dave Ramsey approach to, if you can't afford it, then don't. And so there were lots of things we just simply couldn't pursue. That'd be awesome to add that to the app. Well, you just can't.
Right.
And you don't even think about it again because what's the point? So instead we just kind of hustled along and tried to grow organically.
That's awesome. I feel like your ability to stay focused through that and those trying times is huge. And I was wondering too about just some of the mistakes that you talk about, like what are mistakes you see younger entrepreneurs making and how can they avoid them?
I mean, one of the things that I recommend just simply because based on my own experience is frequently, and I've done this before, we're tempted to like build something and then release it to the world like it's a big surprise, it's a gift, right? Like, look what I cooked up in the back, and now it's here for you. And in a lot of ways, many of us have been kind of inspired or led down that path by like an Apple, where everyone tunes into the keynote, and then Steve Jobs would come out and be like, "Dunno, I just changed the world again," and it's phenomenal. Right. And so early on in the company, when we were getting ready to do a release, and everyone's like, "Let's get the timing just right. You know, we're going to push the release at midnight. Then at 12:01, the email's going to go out, and then we're going to hit social, and we're going to start making some calls the next morning at 8 o'clock. And I was like, that sounds awesome. And I'm kind of a logistics person. So I was like, perfect. And then I was like, wait a second, we're not Apple. Like, no one cares if we release at midnight or 1 o'clock. No one's waiting on us to do it. In fact, we don't have to send the email for like 2 days. We can release quietly and make sure it all works, and then tell people a couple days later. No one's waiting with bated breath to see what we do.
Right.
And so kind of following that logic means that it's good to kind of sell first, if you will. You know, go out, to your point, don't keep it a secret. Go out and talk with a lot of people and just, hey, we're thinking about adding this feature. It's going to work exactly like this. I got some screenshots. I mean, that stuff's pretty cheap. Versus once you decide to commit to building it, as Ryan would tell you, I once told him like, hey, can we add this feature? It's through this API. It's just one line of code. And he was like, even one line of code is not one line of code. That's one of my favorite quotes of Ryan's. Like, it always takes more than that, right? It's always more work. You got to do the integration, everything else. And so it's doing kind of the biz dev side of it before you commit on the product side, because almost invariably you'll get feedback from folks that tweak what you were about to do.
Oh yeah.
And usually in a helpful way.
That is awesome. And it's like, you don't know what you don't know. And right. So if you try to create something and then you release it to the world, and all of a sudden you'll get all these different reviews, and people will say, oh, I wish I had this. And you're like, oh, I didn't even think of that.
Right. Yeah. And then in software, at least, I mean, it's hard to unrelease it. So that certainly is a lesson that we've learned. It's like, if you're going to put something into the app, make sure A, people want it, and B, that we're committed to it. Because once it's in there, it's probably going to stay in there, like probably forever. Because there's at least going to be a few customers that use it, and then you got to support it, and you got to write documentation for it, shoot a video for it, et cetera, et cetera. And then everything you add in the future needs to not break that thing, and it needs to not break the new stuff. And so it's actually a pretty big commitment, as it turns out, to get in and start adding features and moving stuff around. So it's worth doing the upfront work to decide, is this going to advance, in our case, the software, the product overall, or is it going to add complexity that down the road users won't enjoy?
Yeah. And you guys have over 150,000 customers. So, I mean, that's a group of people to take care of if something is not going to work.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's right. Everyone's got their own ideas. So that's a lot of great suggestions, but that's also a lot of suggestions that we can't do everything for everybody. So it's finding the stuff through idea boards and feedback that's the most popular, that more people will benefit than not.
Totally.
And doing those things first.
I wanted to get into your mindset a little bit of how do you define success and how do you define failure?
So I was doing some reading recently on a concept that I personally really enjoy, because I hadn't spent much time on it because we were just pretty heads down and working. But the author was talking about like seasons of a company, seasons in your life, sort of, this is your spring, you're building stuff, et cetera, et cetera. And so I thought about that. People talk about going from success to significance. And it's like, I think in a lot of ways, this significance is what many of us are trying to find what that is. I don't have an answer for that. So this won't be the podcast where Brandon reveals the answer to success and significance. But it's kind of the quest for that, right? The quest for doing something where we can look at for ourselves. And it always helps when others are saying like, this is great, this really helped me, thanks for making that contribution. And we sort of go, oh, okay, well, if you say so, then maybe you're right. Maybe I can attribute that to some success. But more and more, I think it's looking at it and saying, okay, I hope we're doing a good job with the company. Can we do a good job, for our community? Can we help others to follow along this path if we think it's the right one for them? Can we make contributions to, great organizations that serve our community and beyond? An example of that, which we just love doing this last year, we decided to break the Guinness World Record for number of kids in school learning how to code.
That's awesome.
And so we partnered with Knox County Schools, which is one of the largest school districts. That has about 60,000 kids in it, and Oak Ridge Schools. And on one day, we got almost 9,000 kids in 50 schools online at the exact same time, doing the exact same coding lesson through Scratch, the program that MIT wrote, learning how to code. And they all simultaneously took pictures and videos to prove, that they had done it, because Guinness has to certify all of it. And awesome experience, right? The kids were super excited. Everyone got to take home a certificate that said, I helped break a Guinness World Record today. And that was neat, because some of them had coded before, or had a little class in it and so forth, but the vast majority had not. And so it was just an opportunity for them to say, I can control the computer. I'm a consumer already. I'm already using websites and social networks, but I can make it do what I want. And there's a lot of power and creativity in that. Okay, there's a ball. Well, I want to make it green, and I want to make it bounce, and I want to make it go through a hoop. Okay, we're going to be here for a half an hour trying to figure that out. And sometimes they'd raise their hand, Mr. Bruce, can you come show me how to make it go through the hoop? I have no idea. I have no idea how to do that. Like, we're going to have to sit and figure it out together. So they thought, like, oh, the tech guy, he must have the answer. It's like, A, Ryan's in charge of the coding. And B, each of these situations is unique. So we had to figure it out together. So it was fun to see, that many light bulbs come on in the same morning at the same time. So, having the company enabling us to be able to do stuff like that is pretty great. So that would be kind of a small example of, success significance, or at least something that we attribute significance to.
That's amazing. That is great. And when you look at failure, and I ask people a lot of times, how they view failure, because I find that a lot of entrepreneurs look at it differently than most people. How do you view failure?
I mean, I think my knee-jerk reaction tends to be, I don't like it. Many of us in entrepreneurship are pretty competitive, hence a lot of the sports analogies and stuff. And so there's not too many people that are like, well, I went and played and I lost the game, so awesome, let's go get pizza. It's like that pizza was never tasted as good as the pizza after you won the soccer, basketball, football, tennis, baseball game, whatever it was. That was always more fun. Everyone smiled more. The parents smiled more, right? You're getting this feedback loop, good game, and you lost. There wasn't, there was like good try. Yeah. I was like, no, I like good game better. So yeah, that said, I mean, I think it's been important for people to share stories, just like I think it's good when we share stories of like, here's something that worked, and here's 10 things that we tried that didn't, where like we spent a lot of time, money, both. It didn't work out. Like, whoops, should have done something different, but we made the best decision we could at the time.
What's one of those things that you guys just wasted?
Yeah, the thing that I've read or heard most recently that somehow is, I don't know, comforting is the right word, is a person out there, I think maybe they gave a TED talk on it, essentially with the concept that everything fails eventually. And so it's all just a matter of time. And that provides just some nice perspective, where it's like, if I see a company go from 0 to Fortune 500, I'm like, look at that. That's incredible success. But if we just stretch the time horizon a little bit longer, most of the time that company is going to fall off the Fortune 500, right? That's what we've been seeing over the last 10, 20 years, is the companies that all the business success books were written on that we read, or I was reading back in high school and college. Some of those companies don't exist anymore. Some of them have fallen off the index. Yeah. And it's like, yeah, but they were the best. Yes, they were the best then. And we should count the success as a success. Just because Blockbuster is starting to close its final stores now doesn't mean that Blockbuster wasn't an incredible business and that they executed brilliantly.
Right.
But yes, it was successful for a time. Dinosaurs were successful for a time, right? I mean, you sort of extrapolate it any which way you want. But I like that just in the sense that, time is going to win, sort of like gravity always wins. Time is going to win. And so let's be as successful as we can for as short or as long as we can. And then, time is going to take over from there. We don't have control over that. Like, I was talking with some friends. So Oak Ridge National Lab is located off the street. It's where they maintain the nuclear arsenal. It was part of the Manhattan Project.
Oh, wow.
Back in World War II. Magnificent, amazing facility. And one of the highest densities of PhDs in the country. So there's all sorts of smart people running around. But I was asking them what they worked on. And they said, well, we're project managers. And I said, well, tell me about one of your projects. They said, well, we can't tell you about the project because it's classified. They said, but what we can say is the project has a time horizon of 100 years. So we're creating the project plan now, and it will get handed off to a new team when we retire or leave. And then that team will hand off to a third team. And somewhere toward the end of that third team's term or the beginning of the fourth team, the project will conclude. And I was like, it was like mind blowing.
Yeah.
I was like, that's so cool. You're creating a plan for something, you're planting a seed for a tree, and you'll never enjoy that shade. You're doing it for later. This is a big project. This can take a long time. And I'm like, my project plans at work are more like, hey, let's try to knock this out in the next sprint. We got 6 to 8 weeks, or we got 2 weeks to knock out this marketing campaign. So it's much shorter. So yeah, it's all, and to bring back the analogy to some of the endurance sports, your mind sort of changes how you view like mileage. So now if someone was like, go ride 200 miles, I'd be like, shoot, that sounds like it's going to take a long time. It's a long way to go. Like, that's a long drive. But when I was doing it, it was like, you just break it up into chunks. So I remember being out on rides and just being like, oh, cool. The next stretch is 30 miles. That's no problem. I'll just do that stretch. And most of the time, 30 miles is the full ride. But during a 200, you just break the race into 30-mile stretches. You're good to go.
That's great for endurance racing. Yeah. And for business, right? I mean, just, I'll do this right here, break it into chunks. And, you know, I'll do this for the next 6 weeks, this for the next 6 weeks. And then before you know it, a year's passed and you've accomplished a lot.
Every year faster than the one before somehow.
Totally.
I don't know how.
I wanted to ask one question too. I talk a lot about the 80-20 rule kind of from statistics, but I think 80% of our results come from roughly 20% of our actions. And the key is just knowing which actions to take. From your experience, I was wondering what's some of the best actions you've taken to acquire customers quickly?
I mean, I think for us, this has always been true. It may be even increasingly true today. And there's some irony to this because we're a cloud software company. We're online all the time. We do mostly online demos. We do lots of email. Our app is an email app. But so many of our important and long-term and big customer relationships are the fruit of in-person meetings. So we do a lot of user group presentations. We do a lot of conference appearances. And at any moment that's possible, we, get on the plane or take the car and go visit the customer and see how they work and learn about their company. And that can be expensive. It can be hard. It takes up time. It doesn't always work. But the batting average is really high. And those relationships are solid because it's built on more than, I'm doing business with, let me look up his name and email because I've never met him. I don't know anything about him really. But they have some cool software versus like, Brandon flew out here and spent 2 or 3 days with us and really understands the workflow and what we're trying to do and how we sell a widget. And that's the company we want to do business with. It's a differentiator. It's the way we learn the most and satisfy our curiosity. But it's also different because many companies aren't going to do that or won't do that or can't. So I think that's one of the things where if you were to tell people like, we'll get on a plane and travel across the country all the time, they'd be like, that doesn't sound like a good idea at all. That sounds really risky and not scalable. But for us, that's helped us to get, many of our biggest and best customers is because we have that relationship with them, and the relationship becomes the strength and the glue that holds it together for years on end.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it's tougher for people, especially with email being so easy to do these days, and you can scale it so quickly to kind of go backwards. But like you said, the batting average is a lot higher. So once you create that rapport and you build the relationships, you've now increased your ability to earn their business tenfold.
Yeah, and it's doing both. It's using email in service of getting the meeting, and then once you have the meeting, follow up by email, right? So it's definitely not going to get rid of any medium, just like everyone always says, cold calling is dead. It's like, phones are going to be around for a while. Talking with people on the phone, just like we're doing today, right? I mean, we could have done this interview by email. I could have just tapped out answers, but somehow live talking with each other brings out hopefully more and better information than if we were just to, transcribe it.
Absolutely. I mean, the endurance racing, man, if I would have just read that, it's just not as exciting to hear you talk about Death Valley, 500 plus miles. Like, come on. Totally. I love it. And Brandon, I want to just say thank you very much for coming on today. Real quick before we end this, where can everybody find you online?
Well, since we do spend a lot of time in the inbox, email is always good. So Brandon at cirrusinsight.com. Otherwise, certainly LinkedIn, Brandon Bruce. Spend quite a bit of time on that platform. setting up meetings and hanging out with folks. So,
and where can we get the app at?
Yeah, go to cirrusinsight.com. It's like a 2-click install for Gmail or Outlook. So it's dead simple to get into your inbox. And it'll give you a really, really best-in-class integration with SalesForce, and also a lot of the productivity tools that you come to expect, sort of the missing ingredients of Gmail and Outlook. So email tracking and templates and appointment scheduling, all the stuff that helps you save time, so that hopefully you can spend more time getting out and meeting with customers.
Awesome. Thanks, Brandon. So what is your next level of success?
Shoot, that's a great question. For me, it's going to be knocking out this 1,100-mile bike ride in a couple months, getting fit again. But I think the thing I spend the most time thinking about in terms of the next level of success is hopefully modeling some good behaviors so that my kids who are young will see that and be like, okay, like that's how you go about doing that. That's how you treat people with respect. That's how you hold your integrity even when it's hard, even when you're pressed with a hard decision or something's not going to go your way. How do you react to that? And so, I think if we all remember back to when we were kids, we were always watching, we're always picking up cues. How am I going to do this when I get older? So, to the extent that they pick up some of that and, decide to be creative and kind of follow their own ideas and see where they go, I'll be really happy with that result.
That's awesome, man. Brandon, thank you so much for coming on Unleash Success.
Awesome to be here. Thanks a bunch.
If you enjoyed the show and learned something of value, the one ask that I have is please go subscribe, whether you're on iTunes, Spotify, or YouTube. And if you leave us a 5-star rating and review, that absolutely helps us get our message out there. Each week, I'm going to continue to interview amazing people, and we're going to break down their tools and strategies to help get you real results. Feel free to visit the website, unleashsuccess.com, and subscribe to our newsletter so you get updates each week. And remember, knowing is not enough. Knowledge alone is not power. Action is. Because action is the only way you're going to get the results you want in life and truly live the life of your dreams. So take some action, subscribe to the podcast today, and get ready to unleash success in you.